Well, I've got to tell you guys, these engines are dead. The 1776, 1835, they're dead. Let's talk about why I'm talking about this. Unless you have a mountain of old heads from the 80s that are still good, which is pretty much nobody at this point, and you have your own valve grinding equipment to do them, which again, most of you guys don't. The stuff that's on the market now is not designed for building a 1776 or 1835 or 1600. And I said this in several videos. I'm hoping this gets the impact out there. So again, what I've said in other videos is if you are going to have your heads done, you're going to take them into a shop, it's going to be almost the same price or maybe more to have your old heads redone than just buying a new set. So a lot of guys are not listening, and I've watched several guys say, hey man, I'm going to build a 1776. I bought a brand new 69 crank. A guy just put a video up. He built a brand new 1776 for his car, and this thing's going to run like dog meat. Okay, and this is why I'm trying to get this to you guys, because everything, all the new parts are all designed for bigger engines. They're not designed to build a 1776 anymore. It's not designed for a 1835. Now I'm going to be building an 1835 coming up, but it's because I have a old 69 crank that's still brand new. It still has no miles on it. Okay, and I have old heads from the 80s. So the thing is about the old heads back then is they were making them stock brand new heads were 50 cc. Okay, almost every new head you can buy is between 55 and 60 cc. So unless you're going to take a brand new set of heads and deck them down super low and do what we used to do the opposite of doing, it is much harder to put more cc in your head than take it out. So what we used to do back in the old days is we would take a stock head and we would Hemi cut it and do all this stuff to get the stock head to have more cc's. The new heads already come with the cc's in them. Guys, I've been saying this for a while, but it seems like it's not getting through to a lot of people. So the old heads, it was tough to get them to get compression, to get the compression low enough. You used to build, you try to build a 74 stroke or 76 stroke or 78.4, something like that, and you would have such a high compression ratio from those old 50 cc heads. We had to take them in and have them all opened up. You guys, the brand new heads are already done. It's already done that way. So why are people putting together 1776s anymore when all the parts are just yelling at you? They're saying, please make me big. Like I said, if you got an old head pile, you got valve grinding equipment to do your own, that's got a different set of rules in it. But if you're buying new parts, you guys, it's time to go big. Bigger is better. And yes, it can be 100% reliable with a 74 stroke crank or a 76. You can, and people go, oh, well, it's more reciprocating weight. It's just a little bit more, okay? But you got a counterweighted crankshaft like the Porsche. Remember, the Porsche was a 74 with 5352 rods. I'm building 74s, and I'm doing, this one's going to be a 76. 74s and 76s with 5325 rods. So they're whatever, I don't know, a few thousand shorter than the Porsche rod. And the Porsche engine was more reliable, longer lasting than the Volkswagen. The cars were more expensive. You know, all the stuff they have on the market now is designed for bigger engines. It's not designed for a 1776 anymore, you guys. Please, listen. Right, so your 69 chromoly 4140, 4340 counterweighted, your 74 and your 76. I believe all of those are the same price. Okay, so it costs you no more money to go bigger. Unless you're going cheap on the rods and going with stock rods, okay? If you're going to buy chromoly rods, which I highly recommend you guys do both, I mean, this is the heart of your engine. Don't go cheap on the heart. Spend the money on this. Guys go and spend all this money on big cylinders and heads and all this stuff. But this piece right here is what's going to make your engine last. Counterweighted, please. Counterweighted crankshaft. Chromoly clearance. Do you see how these are a little clearance like that? I-beam rods. These work great. You can get a lot of power out of these right here. And I'm not talking about a lot of longevity. And I'm not talking about going really big. You know, a 2021 isn't even that big of an engine. You start going with those really long stroke engines and it starts putting case stress on it. You're taking away the case stress by having counterweights, you guys. The counterweights help stop that center main wear. All right, so going to a 74, you're taking away a little bit because you got more reciprocating weight, but you're also giving it back because you've got counterweights. So it's a way better engine to build. So I get it. Sometimes you go out and you spun a rod bearing on your engine, on your whatever, your 69, and you want the cheap way. So you go out and you buy the 69 stroke crankshaft. Maybe you're gonna go with a cast crank, and that I understand. Okay, you're gonna go with the cast counterweighted crank for that, and you're just gonna put together the 1600 again because you don't have the money. I get it. Okay, I completely understand that, and I'm not trying to discount that at all. But guys, when you're going out and you're spending hundreds of dollars on new cylinders and tin, and you're buying, you know, all the stuff, you're building a whole engine, you're spending $2,000, $2,000 to $3,000, and you cheap out on the crankshaft. I mean, really, come on, guys. You know, you're saving what, $200, and you're risking $3,000 of your money with all the other parts. It just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. And guys are doing it all the time. I see it, just guys emailing me. And I'm not trying to say one person. I'm getting a lot of guys that are emailing me going, hey man, I'm building a 1776 or an 1835. And I got a brand new counterweighted crank. It's like, what? You know, did you guys watch my other videos where I said to buy 74s? All the parts are designed around this. They're designed about build. They want you to build. All the parts are begging you. They're saying, please make me bigger. It's crazy because in the old days, in the 80s, okay, it wasn't this way. To make an engine bigger, it was way more expensive. That's why everybody built 69 stroke motors. That's why everybody tried to get as much power out of 1776 or an 1835 as they could, because it was way more expensive. It literally, like, to build an 1835, let's say it costs about $400 in parts, okay? For a 1600, it was about $300. So a little bit more money for the 1835 or the 1776, all right? It was $100 more, okay? To build a 74 stroke, it was $2,000 back then. So think about this for a second. Today, it's like $2,000, $2 to $3,000 in parts to build a 74 stroke motor. Okay, about $3,000, $3,500, I guess, with heads. All right, depending on which heads you go with, it can get expensive when you start getting the 40-35 valves and all that. To build a 74 stroke engine, let's just kind of go over 74, 76. Let's go over what you need. You need 74 or 76 stroke crank. You need a set of, either you can do two different things. You can go with 5.325 rods, or you can go with 5.5 rods and B pistons. Okay, comes out about the same. I think there's like a 20 thousandths shorter. You end up with a little bit more shim with the short rod, with the long rods. With the short rods, it comes out almost completely stock at like 50 thousandths, between 40 and 60 thousandths on the 74 stroke. With the 76 stroke, I don't know, it adds a millimeter. So if you just add 0.75 or something like that, 1 millimeter, yeah, you can add that to the thing. So, 0.75 thousandths. So you might need whatever, some shims to make up for that, maybe, 80 thousandths shim or something like that. You got to figure that all out when you put it together. Now, one of the things that you should do if you build any performance engine, so even if you build a 1776 high performance engine, some of those things can get over 100 horsepower, you should be putting an 8-dowel crank on anyway. Okay, you should be putting an 8-dowel, and that means you need a flywheel. So to do this, you need a 74 stroke crankshaft, some clearance rods, and a flywheel. I use a lightened 8-dowel flywheel. I go to the 12-pound flywheel because I've got the extra weight on the crankshaft. I don't put 12-pound flywheels on 69 stock stroke without any counterweights, you guys. Anything that has counterweights gets a lightened flywheel because that's what they're designed for. Then the only other thing you need to do is right here. Okay, right here about where that rib is. You can see the rib. You can find the center of that. The center is right about right here, right? A little tiny notch right there. A little one right here. Same thing up here. A little tiny notch right here. A little tiny notch right here. Now with a 74, with a 90.5, because this opening is larger, you might not need even to do that. So it's really, really easy to do the clearancing on these. Okay, even the 76. But you should, again, when you get it all done, you put the crankshaft together. You hold the rods in the position where they would be when the engine's going up and down. You can strip down a piston if you want. Take all the rings off of it. Slide the cylinder on. If you want to do that, to just make sure and put half the case together at a time. Slide the cylinder on. Take a couple half-inch drive sockets. Put them over here. Put the nuts on just to hold them in place. That's what I do. I just use a little half-inch drive socket. I just take a socket like that. That's what I do for checking my deck height and everything. I just put a half-inch drive socket on there, kind of angle it on there, boop, and put it on the top of the cylinder. Tighten it down just to hold it down in place so it doesn't move. Okay, a couple half-inch drive sockets. Easiest way to do it. Don't put them on the fins because they'll break them. I just kind of angle it and put it on the top of the cylinder. And if you're worried about damaging it, just put a little piece of a rag around it or something. It works fine. A little bit tricky because you've got to have the case in this position, right? So you're going to put the piston on. You got the crankshaft, it'll just fall out of there. So you got to put the piston on and then put the cylinder on this way and then just have your nut and everything all ready. Put it on there, hold it in place, rotate it around. So your rod is in the correct position and then rotate it around. Make sure that usually it's the rod bolts that will hit right here and here. Okay, real easy modification to do. I mean, I think it's basically a 6th grader thing. It's really not that hard, guys. And guys are going, oh man, I don't know, I'm kind of afraid. Listen, I understand you're afraid. Or you can just go out and take your brand new parts and ruin them. Take a brand new set of heads that we would spend hours and hours to get those extra cc's in that combustion chamber and just deck them down and build your 1776. And then those heads, if you ever wanted to upgrade it again, got to buy a new set. So that's why it doesn't make sense to me, guys. You guys are going out and spending, all this money on brand new parts, and you're buying brand new heads. I mean, brand new heads are great, but they're going out and they're either having to deck those heads way down or they're putting together engines with absolutely no compression. I mean, let me tell you something that won't run. Put a 1776 together with 7.4 to 1 compression or 7 point. This is what you end up with. If you got stock CC heads, so if you go to CB Performance, engine calculator. Look that up on, just do that on Google. You'll find it right away. Go on there, and what you do is you put in the 69 stroke, and you put in the 90.5 cylinders and pistons, and you put in that you got like 60 thousandths deck height, which a lot of guys are doing that, you know, which I've known, because with a 69 stroke, you end up with usually right around there between 40 and 60 deck height. You can't go to zero like things that I do. I'll go to zero, and then I'll step cut my heads, and I'll put everything in the head. It really runs way better. So guys are doing that. You can do all those things when you're doing the larger stroke engine. So you can do things, you can play around with stuff. You can go with 5394 rods, you know. You can go with stock length rods and end up with the piston sticking out of the head a little bit, and then you can shim it out to where it's at zero. You need to have between your piston and your head, okay? However, how you do it, you need to have clearance there, guys. You got to have between, they say the minimum is about 45 thousandths. I would say 50 is okay. I usually go to 50. And on a small engine, like on my little 36 horse, I went to 40, okay? And it's because the engine doesn't get a lot of RPMs. You're going to build an engine that's probably going to get up maybe sometimes to 6,000 RPMs. You're going to need clearance in there, guys. You need that piston, the rod stretch, and all that. It will hit the head. So you have to have clearance. And there's a lot of ways to do that. One way you can do that is if you look here, this right here is a step cut. So the cylinder will set right on that step, and the piston will have clearance between this surface and the piston. So you drop your cylinder down and make sure that that step isn't sticking out, okay? If you can see that step, no good. It has to be completely flush with the cylinder. So then you could run your piston up to, like, you know, 20 thousandths or less deck height. You can go to zero if you want, and have your 40 or 50 thousandths between this surface and the top of the cylinder. Okay, there's that way to do it. Another way you can do it is with copper head gaskets. So they make these here. These are the 94s, because I'm using 92 thick walls. So I could put these in between, these are 60 thousandths. They make 40, 50, and 60 thousandths of these, okay? And so you can get your deck height that way, okay? So you have to have clearance between the top of your piston and your head, all right? You have to have clearance in there. You have to have, they say minimum 45, okay? Stock was between 50 and 60. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, you guys, and the problem with these is if you go with these, and there's benefits a problem with them. The good thing about them is it gives it crush space between your aluminum head and your, it's a softer landing, okay, between your aluminum head and the top of your cylinder. The problem is also that these are going to shrink a little bit when they get hot and cool down once. So you're going to have to retorque your heads. So, and you're going to lose a little bit of that clearance. So if you go too tight with these, it's not a good idea. You better leave a little more looseness in there and plan on that crush rate there, okay? So that's what I do when I do these, if you're going to do it. There's just a lot more things you can do when you go to a stroker engine. There's so many more options you can play around with. You can get it to run a lot better by doing that. You guys, the thing you just don't want to do is you don't want to put an engine together and not know what your goal is. If you want to get more power, you can't just go out and just go, hey, I'm going to build a 1776 because they have more power. It may not. The engine that I'm just putting together right now was a 1776. It ran like a 40 horse. Why? Because it had a performance cam. Okay? It had a performance cam in it, and it only had 7.4 to 1 or 7.2 to 1 compression. Okay? If you put a performance cam in, you have to increase the compression ratio. You've got more air and fuel volume. There's two things you're looking at. You have air-fuel mixture in your carburetor, okay? And you also have air-fuel volume in your cylinder when it combusts. If you have too much air and fuel in your cylinder when it combusts, it's going to run like it's super fat rich. It's going to have too much air fuel volume in the cylinder for the compression. And that's not the right way to do it. You end up with no power. So you spend a whole bunch of money on parts, okay, wanting to get more power out of it, and you got less power because you have too much air fuel mixture in there. Yeah, it's going to run cool. And sometimes that's the goal. You know, I've done that. But it's also going to have no power. And you were trying to get more power. Okay? So you got to have the proper combination of parts. All the parts are screaming. They are screaming at you. Make me big. That's what all the parts are on the shelf now. They got, the heads have bigger combustion chambers. That's all stuff that we spent tons of time and money to do back in the old days when we built a stroker engine. Now it's just already done for you. All you got to do is just put it together and make sure, you know, you get what you want. You know, you play around with the deck height, and you can get more in the head, and you know, getting more fire in the head is going to give you a better running engine. It's going to run cooler. It's going to have less detonation, so you can run a higher compression ratio by doing that. So again, all these parts are all designed for this. You got to do your homework though, guys. You got to go out. You got to get on the CB Performance Engine Calculator and start putting numbers in about what you're trying to get and develop your engine that way. Another thing you need to do when you start your engine build is when you put it all together, don't buy your heads when you're doing the engine. You wait till you do your deck height, okay? I do not order heads until I've got, I can order them now. I kind of know what I'm going to end up with, okay? Like I've got some heads already coming for this engine because I already know what I'm going to end up with. It's going to be, you know, around 50,000 deck height, and I'm going to end up with probably about 8.6 to 1, which is about where I want to be. I want that higher compression because I've got more air and fuel going in there, and I got a bigger cam, okay? So, you know, those are all things I've calculated out already. So you get to the point where you do your deck height, you go to the CB Performance Engine Calculator, and you figure out, okay, I need this CC head for this to work, okay? But if you're building a 1776, I'm telling you, you're throwing money away on this, all right? You really are. You're building a 1776, you're going, oh, wow, you know, this is the old school engine. And the reason we did it old school is because it was cheap. Now it's not the other, it's the other way. It's cheaper to go big. It's better to go big. We always wanted to go bigger, but we couldn't afford to back in the day. You guys, now you can do it. It's so easy. It's just like, it's crazy that guys are going back to 1776s and 1835s and buying brand new heads. It just doesn't make sense. It's just way easier with the parts they have today to go bigger and get the power, you know, get the power with a bigger engine. It just, you know, it's, I don't know. I don't know why guys are doing it. It's this mentality of back in the old days, we used to do it. The reason we used to do that is because we couldn't afford to go bigger. It was like, it was a big, huge difference. It was a huge gap. $2,000 for parts versus 400 bucks was just like, no, we weren't doing that. You know, nowadays it's like the same price. Why would you go, or $100 difference? It's like, why would you go stock? Why would you go to the 1776? You can do a 1904, or a 1968, or a, you know, or a 2021. You know, it's just, I don't know. Tell me in the comments below. I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Hopefully this helps convince a couple guys to do the right thing. I'll talk to you in the next one.